I wanted to surprise my son with something simple, almost childish, but the thought alone filled me with joy. At 62, life had already stolen so many small pleasures from me that I grabbed onto any opportunity to feel that spark again. I remembered how he used to smile when he was little, when I'd show up at his school unannounced, bringing a hidden snack in my purse. That morning I decided to relive that gesture. I slipped into his car quietly while he was getting ready inside the house, and settled into the back seat, curled up small. The cold leather stuck to my skin, but my heart was warm with anticipation. I imagined the scene. Him getting in, finding me there, and laughing out loud saying, "Mom, you're impossible." The silence in the car was almost conspiratorial. The scent of his cheap cologne still hung in the air, mixed with the faint smell of gasoline embedded in the fabric. I lightly touched the purse I held with me, remembering how I had planned to buy his favorite dish for lunch later. I just wanted this. A moment that was ours, unhurried, without that invisible barrier that seemed to separate us in recent months. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the key turning in the door. My body trembled with anticipation. The car door handle pressed down firmly, and the sound of the ignition followed soon after. But before I could position myself to reveal my presence, a second voice filled the space. A female voice, firm, almost harsh, carrying a tone of possession. She sat in the front seat with a rehearsed gesture, like someone already accustomed to occupying that place. Gradually my smile faded. What I should have felt as surprise transformed into a painful tightness in my chest. My breathing became shallow, almost non-existent, so they wouldn't notice my hiding place. And when she began to speak, I realized that fate had other plans for that morning. The first sentence that escaped her lips was like a cold blade sliding across my skin. "Your mother will never fit in, you know that." My son didn't respond immediately. He just let out a long, tired sigh, as if he agreed but didn't have the courage to say it out loud. That was enough to make my heart shudder. In that instant, I realized that the surprise I had prepared for him would transform into something much bigger. Something I would never have planned, but that would mark my life forever. And what I heard next burned more than any silence between us. She adjusted her straight, light hair with her fingertips, like someone looking in an invisible mirror. The gesture was full of confidence, from someone certain they occupied the place they desired. Her voice, however, carried no softness. It came loaded with disdain, a studied tone to wound without raising her voice. "You need to think about your future. She's already lived what she had to live. A woman that age, that color, will only be a burden in your life." I felt as if the air was ripped from my lungs. The words echoed inside me, each syllable cutting like a knife. I curled up even more in the back seat, holding back tears with the strength that only a mother learns to have. What hurt wasn't just her poison, but his silence. My son, the same one I carried in my womb and rocked in my arms, didn't open his mouth to defend me. He just ran his hand over the steering wheel firmly and let out a low grumble, almost of agreement. The streets passed by the window, but I couldn't see anything. Only the reflection of the years I spent washing other people's clothes, enduring sideways glances and muffled laughter to ensure he had education, food, clean clothes. I remembered the times they treated me like the black maid, and I would smile, swallow hard, because I believed it would all be worth it when I saw my son proud. Now there it was as if every sacrifice had turned to dust. She continued, "You can't let her ruin your social life. People talk, you know. They've already asked me how you still put up with living in that house. It looks like a museum." Her laugh was dry, unpleasant, and cut through me like a slap. My son didn't laugh, but he also didn't silence her. I held my purse so tightly that my fingers went numb. It was as if, in that moment, the world was pushing me out of his life. And I, there hidden, realized I was hearing something that should never be said, but that, somehow, had always existed in the subtext. Perhaps that's the greatest burden. Not just hearing prejudice from strangers, but feeling it seep through the cracks of your own family. If you've lived through this shock, of realizing that love can become silence in the face of prejudice, subscribe now. Because what I'm going to tell you next shows that even wounded, a woman like me learns to rise from the ashes. And I didn't know at that moment that those words would be just the first thread of a web of betrayals that would trap me much deeper. The car continued forward, cutting through streets I knew with my eyes closed, but that in that instant seemed strange, as if I were in enemy territory. At each traffic light, she moved closer to him, spoke in low tones, almost intimate, like someone who already occupied a space that wasn't theirs by right. "She's like an old piece of furniture," she said, adjusting her seatbelt with a sharp click. "Takes up space, but isn't useful for anything anymore." My son laughed, nervous, a short laugh that didn't hide his embarrassment, but also didn't stop him from being complicit in that cruelty. My chest burned. The memory of my days of struggle crushed me. The swollen feet after 12 hours standing, scrubbing other people's floors. The teary but steady eyes when neighbors commented that a black woman like me shouldn't dream so high for her son. "He's going to be somebody," I would respond silently. And he was. But now it seemed that being somebody had a price, erasing the existence of the one who brought him into this world. With each of her words, the feeling was that the seat where I hid was shrinking, forcing me to dive even deeper into silence. The urge to get up, to scream, was enormous. But something inside me said I needed to hear it to the end, needed to understand the extent of that farce. It was then that she lowered her voice and let slip. "Everything's already arranged. She just needs to sign. Convince her, use the argument about your busy life. Say it's for her own good to simplify things." My heart went cold. Sign what? What were they plotting behind my silence? I looked at his hands on the steering wheel, firm but tense. He didn't interrupt her, didn't question her. He just nodded, eyes fixed on the road, as if guilt didn't dare face him head-on. In that moment, I realized that what I had discovered wasn't just prejudice or contempt. It was a plan. And within that plan I was the obstacle. And when the word inheritance arose from her lips, I understood that the plot was much darker than I could bear. My stomach churned when I heard that poisonous word. Inheritance. She pronounced it like someone speaking of an awaited prize, not of a lifetime of sweat. "As soon as she signs, everything will be ours. That house is too big for her. It'll be perfect for the two of us," she said, adjusting her purse on her lap as if she already had the keys in hand. My son didn't protest. There wasn't even a "don't talk about my mother like that." He just breathed deeply and responded in a low voice. "She's stubborn. But I'll find a way." Those few words fell on me like stones. The boy I carried in my arms, whom I rocked through feverish nights, was now an accomplice to a woman who wanted me out of my own house. I felt a mixture of rage and disbelief. The city lights passed quickly by the window, like sparks scratching my memory. I remembered every brick of that house, raised with my tired hands. How many times I faced humiliations silently to be able to pay a mason, buy cement, guarantee a roof for both of us. And now my own son was plotting to tear me away from it. The car stopped in front of a restaurant. They got out together, laughing about something only they shared. I remained hidden, motionless, until I was sure they were far away. My hands shook so much I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out loud. I couldn't give myself away. I needed to guard every word, every gesture, like a flame that would one day become fire. That night, lying in my bed, I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed like a drum in my chest. "As soon as she's out, everything will be ours." And my son's empty expression, more painful than any insult, told me I was alone. But within the silence, a spark began to be born. I didn't know how or when, but one thing was certain. If they had a plan against me, I would have an even bigger one against them. And I just didn't imagine that, in the following days, the microaggressions would begin to multiply, revealing that this betrayal wasn't an accident, but a web that had been woven for a long time. The following days were a cruel theater. Her smile, always polite in front of the neighbors, transformed into irony when we were alone. "You should rest more. You're not young enough for so much anymore," she would say, leaving the phrase hanging, like someone insinuating I was already dead weight. At the table, she served my plate last, as if it were an automatic gesture, but always with that calculated pause that transformed silence into humiliation. My son, increasingly distant, spoke to me in short sentences, as if I were an uncomfortable reminder of something he wanted to bury. When someone praised my work ethic or commented on how I had fought for life, he would look away, embarrassed. It was as if my story was a source of shame. The worst, however, were the looks from others. Neighbors who used to greet me warmly now whispered on the corner, "He deserves better," with that simple old mother. I heard, pretended not to listen, but every word was a knife that dug deeper. His woman fed this chorus of contempt, telling stories in a laughing tone, always painting me as outdated, antiquated, a weight that hindered their progress. And still I maintained silence. You know why? Because invisibility can also be a weapon. They thought I was blind, but I saw every detail. They believed I was fragile, but my strength was in waiting for the right moment. One night, tidying up the kitchen, I heard muffled laughter coming from the bedroom. I walked slowly, barefoot so as not to make noise. Through the partially open door, I saw a beige folder on the table. My heart raced. I waited for them to get distracted and, in a quick movement, stretched out my hand, leafing through the first pages. And there it was, documents with my name. Will, power of attorney, even a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. My hands shook so much I had to close my eyes for a moment. I took my phone from my pocket and photographed each page, even in the dim light. I put everything back silently. It was just the beginning of my proof. And I knew I needed more than blurred images to dismantle that farce. I began to live like a shadow inside my own house, pretending distraction, but observing every gesture, every word that escaped carelessly. Gradually, their web revealed itself before me. I saw the woman take my grocery card, stuff it in her purse with a satisfied smile, as if it were her right. Later I noticed bills missing from my wallet. And when I gently confronted my son, he just mumbled, "You must have gotten confused." Those words were said without looking me in the eyes, like someone speaking to someone already discarded. One morning, while he was shaving in the bathroom, his phone vibrated on the bed. The screen lit up and for a second I saw the message. "As soon as she's out of the house, everything will be ours. Trust me." I felt my heart race. It was confirmation of the conspiracy. I took a quick photo before the screen went dark. With each new piece of evidence, my body seemed heavier, but my mind sharper. I knew that confronting them directly at that moment would be useless. They were convinced I was fragile, inattentive, incapable of reacting. So I smiled. A false, calculated smile. One of those that only someone who has swallowed humiliations knows how to sustain. I learned to respond, "Of course, dear. And as you wish, my son," while my mind silently constructed each step of revenge. Silence became my shield and patience my weapon. I kept the photos in a hidden folder, noted dates, times, even small phrases that could one day be repeated before witnesses. I wasn't just a betrayed mother. I was beginning to become a strategist. And amid this silent collection, I understood something powerful. They didn't realize that the more they made me invisible, the more space they gave me to see what was really happening. It was time to transform pain into strategy. And it was in that instant that an idea began to be born. One that would require courage, but that, if well executed, would make them choke on their own poison. I began to devise the plan like someone weaving an old dress. With patience, stitch by stitch, without haste, respecting every fold that life had taught me to sew. First, I silenced my mouth and opened my eyes, because the only advantage I had over them was the entire story I carried and that they believed they had erased. I left the house as always, swept the front, waved to passers-by, smiled at the cashier at the market. On the outside, nothing changed. On the inside, everything was calculation. I sought out the lawyer the community knew. A young woman, quick-spoken, attentive eyes, who had already helped neighbor women recover what had been taken from them. She received me in a small office, with a pile of cases, a smell of coffee in the air, and a message board on the wall where stories of injustice became evidence. I explained without dramatizing. I handed over the photos, the messages, the copies of documents I had found. She leafed through everything with the same tranquility with which someone sweeps dust from a valuable piece of furniture, discarding what is superfluous until finding the firm truth. Meanwhile, I returned home as if nothing had happened. Her role, the woman, continued with her routine of microaggressions disguised as courtesy. "You should take better care of yourself," she would say while serving me, with a rehearsed smile. "Sometimes I think it's better to change things for everyone's good." The phrase came polished, but the poison was the same, an attempt to erase my presence with civility. Neighbors looked, half words, low chuckles. I mentally noted names, times, small gestures, the kind of detail that seems insignificant until it becomes evidence. I decided I needed witnesses. I spoke with Maria, the bakery owner, who had known me since I was a girl, with Mr. Joachim, who always swept the street at 7 in the morning and who had seen the gifts coming and going, even with the young nurse who came to the house to get documents for the clinic. Each one agreed to be attentive, to help if something needed to be proven out loud. We exchanged complicit glances. People who live on the margins know how to recognize when injustice knocks on someone's door who has always been alongside them. I recorded conversations when I could, not out of base revenge, but so that the voice of truth would have an echo outside my chest. I learned to leave my phone in strategic places, on the table in the hallway, and to record the words I once thought the wind would carry away. With each saved file, I felt my anger transforming into organized strength. I didn't want to humiliate for the sake of humiliating. I wanted justice, clean exposure, so that lies would have nowhere to hide. I organized the dossier calmly. Photos of messages, images of documents, statements showing strange withdrawals, the photo of the card in her pocket. The lawyer stamped, signed, and said only, "We'll make them public at the right moment. They can't hide behind family." The phrase sounded like light. I scheduled a celebratory lunch. I invented an anniversary, any excuse that would gather people from the street, relatives and neighbors. I chose a sunny day, so the house would be full and their discomfort would be amplified by witnesses. While preparing the table, I felt each plate as part of a performance. Aligned glasses, stretched tablecloth, a flower that was the only softness allowed. I placed, hidden among the cutlery, my printed dossier. Cold paper, hot words. In the days leading up to the party, the woman made sure to be theatrical. She invited people to praise the son's new phase, spoke loudly about plans and trips. In front of the mirror, she fixed her hair like someone putting on armor of audacity. My son, in turn, passed by me with short steps, downcast eyes. There was guilt there, but also fear. And cowardice and fear together are worse than hatred. Before lunch began, I breathed deeply. I looked at my reflection in the window. The marked skin, hands with a trace of work, hair already sprinkled with silver. There was a woman there who knew the taste of effort and who no longer wanted to swallow insults. I took the folder firmly, not like someone wielding a weapon, but like someone holding the truth. If this story resonates with you, share it. There are so many mothers, aunts, grandmothers, mature black women, who carry similar pains, and sharing this is beginning to dismantle what wants us invisible. And when the guests began to settle in, I knew the moment had arrived. The air was heavy with rehearsed smiles, and I had only one move to make so that everything hidden there would no longer fit in silence. The house seemed to vibrate with the sound of cutlery and conversations, but for me each laugh was a blade. She glided through the room as if she owned everything, with her new dress and the look of someone who believes they've already conquered territory. My neighbors greeted her, some with certain hidden disdain, others with that superficial admiration given to those who appear to have power. My son, nervous, spoke too loudly, as if his voice could muffle the truth he carried in his chest. I remained silent, observing. I was there at the table, serving the food I prepared with my own hands, but the feeling was that they thought I was just part of the furniture. I let the theater continue until the moment of the toast. Glasses were raised, eyes turned to my son. He smiled, tried to say a few words about family and unity, and it was then that I stood up. The room fell silent. The sound of glasses still reverberated when I extended my hands and placed, Right in the center of the table, a pile of papers. They weren't flowers, they weren't wine, they weren't words of affection. They were copies of falsified documents, account statements, printed messages. One of the guests choked. Another dropped his fork on his plate. Her face lost color in a second. My son widened his eyes like a boy caught in mischief, but this time the mischief had the weight of a crime. You talk about inheritance as if I were already dead. My voice came out calm, firm, almost cutting. But I'm alive. More alive than ever. I swept my eyes across the room. I saw neighbors looking at each other, relatives murmuring. Each page I turned was a sharp crack in their hearts. I showed the falsified signature, the messages where she promised. As soon as she's out, everything will be ours. The silence was so dense it seemed to have a body. My breathing sounded like thunder inside me, but outwardly I was serene. Each humiliation I had swallowed until then now became a witness in my favor. And yet, they still didn't know I had one last revelation saved. One that wouldn't allow that moment to be just embarrassment, but the beginning of their downfall before everyone. The room remained motionless for a few seconds that lasted an eternity. I saw her face change from pale to red in fractions of a second, as if she were trying to redraw an expression that no longer fit. My son searched for words, stumbling over each syllable. Someone murmured, "Is this false?" Another voice whispered, "How did she get this?" I breathed deeply, letting calm be my steel. It was then that the lawyer stood up. She came discreetly, like a shadow that suddenly reveals itself to be presence. The same one I had visited in her small office with the smell of coffee and cases. She placed the folder on the table, opened it with a sober gesture and spoke with a voice that didn't need microphones. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything here has been duly registered at the notary's office. We have receipts, call records, and witnesses." The word notary hit the room like a hammer, formal, implacable. Some guests began to leaf through the copies I had distributed. Others remained motionless, unable to accept that they knew a scheme orchestrated from within the family. The woman tried to smile and recover her composure, but the laughter was now thin, forced, a piece that no longer fit. I looked at her and, without hatred, said, "You made calculations with my life, as if it were numbers on a spreadsheet. But I'm not a sum, I'm history." The phrase echoed among the plates. My son spoke, trying to justify, excuse, minimize. "Mom, it's that we were worried about the future, about expenses, about things with the house." I heard the hesitation, the vice of lies that twists to keep from breaking. When he opened his mouth, a cousin of his, a man who had always treated me with cordiality, looked down ashamed. Their complicity began to crumble like a house of cards. An aunt, who until then feigned neutrality, approached with a low voice. But I saw when she took the card. Mr. Joachim, from the corner, confirmed having seen the woman leaving with extra bags on the day I swore I had spent little. Maria, from the bakery, held her own trembling hand, ready to testify if necessary. Small, common witnesses, who carried in their routines the honesty that power wanted to suffocate. And then, the net I had arranged in silence took effect. The lawyer explained procedures, showed protocols, the notarized registration of messages, the expert signature analysis, bank statements indicating unexplained withdrawals. Everything there clear, technical, but heavy as truth. The woman tried to deny, exchanging glances with my son, who now faced his own reflection in the window glass, as if seeking another face to assume. A guest took out his phone and, without thinking twice, began recording. The video was short, vertical, but it had the heat of the room and the harsh sound of voices. In seconds, and modern life is like that, treacherous, someone posted it on social media. A piece of the fight, the piles of paper on the table, her pale face, my silence that was now a shield. The phone's vibration spread like a second earthquake. Their shame left the intimate and went public. My son tried to stand up, his voice choked. "Mom, please." "Please no," I replied. "Don't say please when you helped plan this." The words didn't come out as an attack. They came out as a statement. There was between us, the weight of truth aligned with facts. The clamor of witnesses took the place of complicity. The woman, cornered, tried to tear the papers from the table, a gesture of desperation that only exposed more the nerve of her lie. An older neighbor approached and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I don't meddle in other people's business, but I know how to distinguish who works hard from who wants to take advantage." The phrase was like wind spreading ashes. It reached my son's face, which withered. The feeling that took me wasn't primary revenge. It was relief. Relief to see the plot unravel, to see the news of truth spread, and no longer remain confined to whispers between four walls. I saw people who previously ignored my presence sit beside me carefully, like someone recognizing a fellow traveler. An unknown woman squeezed my hand and whispered, "You have all my support." In those voices, I felt the thread of humanity returning to surround me. Even so, the story wasn't over. My son cried, asked for forgiveness between sobs that seemed more like pleas for salvation from his own mistake. The woman left the room, trembling, and slammed the door hard. The midday light entered like a spotlight, illuminating the table with its exposed papers. But while some guests shared opinions, others were already calling. Distant relatives, acquaintances, anyone who could lessen the damage. I sat down. My heart beat strongly, not with hatred, but with a warrior calm. The lawyer signaled to me. It was time to take the next step outside the house, legal, public, where the power of law could crown the truth. "They will have to answer," she said. "Not just morally, but legally." And when I thought the scene had given all its weight, a strange voice from the hallway announced, "The police are here." The sound of the doorbell announced something bigger than shame, a consequence that could transform that family's humiliation into a legal change with echoes throughout the entire neighborhood. And I, looking through the window where the garden shadows moved slowly, understood that the morning when I hid in the car to surprise my son had been just the prologue to a transformation. The last curve of that road still remained, their public downfall and my reconstruction before everyone. But there was something more, one last piece of the puzzle I had saved so that justice would be incontestable. The doorbell echoed through the house like thunder. The murmur ceased, and everyone looked at each other. The woman's face paled completely, and my son, trembling, let the glass slip from his hand, wetting the white tablecloth that now seemed like a war scene. I remained seated, firm, with my eyes fixed on the door. The lawyer stepped forward and opened it. 2 police officers entered, not with brutality, but with the quiet authority of those who already knew what they came for. "We received a formal complaint and prior documentation registered at the notary's office," said one of them, looking directly at me. "We're here to ensure that nothing is removed from this location until it's investigated." The guests stepped back, some murmuring phrases of amazement, others already raising their phones to record everything. The modern world has this parallel justice. Shame no longer stays restricted to walls. It runs fast, without asking permission. The woman tried to react. "This is absurd. She's making everything up." But her voice sounded thin, desperate, and was soon swallowed by the evidence that the lawyer handed to the authorities. My son, without strength to sustain the lie, just mumbled, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want to." But he didn't complete the sentence, because everyone knew he did want to. He wanted it and planned it. With each word from the police officer, the tension transformed into catharsis. I remained erect, feeling my whole body tremble inside, but outwardly maintained the serenity they had always denied me. It was as if all the years of silence, of swallowing humiliations and microaggressions, now condensed into that instant when I finally wouldn't need to explain myself anymore. The neighbors, previously accomplices of whispers and sideways glances, looked at me with silent respect. I saw in their eyes belated recognition. I wasn't a burden, I wasn't a shadow. I was truth incarnate. The officer announced that the investigation would proceed formally, and that everyone present would be listed as witnesses. That sealed their fate. The woman ran out the door, stumbling on her own heels. My son remained seated, defeated, with his head in his hands. When the house returned to silence, I breathed deeply. I walked to the porch, where the afternoon wind swayed the curtains, and felt the freshness of moral victory. It wasn't a victory of screams or blind revenge, but of justice built in silence, step by step. And there, watching the sky tinge with gold, I understood something profound. Kindness is not weakness. My patience, my sweetness, my faith. None of that made me small. On the contrary, it was precisely what gave me strength to resist, to plan, and to win. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now. Here I tell truths that many try to hide, because no mature black woman needs to accept humiliation in silence. And my final reflection echoes still today. They can try to erase me, but while I exist, my voice will be proof that truth is never buried. Because the best revenge, sometimes, is simply remaining standing, and forcing everyone to witness it.